Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this final Sharing 60 from Building People in 2023. My name is Rebecca Lovelace. I'm the founder and chief dot joiner at Building People. We're a hub for equity, diversity and inclusion in construction and the built environment, with a network of over 60 organisations that work with the underrepresented people that our sector needs. Sharing 60s are an opportunity for those in our network to come together, to connect and to share best practice with that all-important focus on equity, diversity and inclusion. And the focus today is on procurement. And I'm so pleased to welcome Professor Tessa Wright from Queen Mary University of London and Professor Hazel Conley from University of the West of England, who will be introducing their interactive equality and diversity toolkit. I'm so excited about this toolkit. I really do believe that procurement is the way to drive change. I'm going to stop there, but we will be having opportunities for Q&A later in the session. So please feel free to either use the chat, message me directly, or later on just directly ask a question to Hazel and to Tessa. So I'll be quiet. Hazel, Tessa, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen, which is our project website. So I hope I've got the right screen there. Can you just confirm that you can see a page that says Buying Social Justice? Great. Okay, that's lovely. So thanks very much to Rebecca and Building People for this great opportunity. I mean, we're academics. We've been doing this project for the last 2 years. But one of the things that we were very keen on right from the beginning was that the project was going to have an impact on the work that people who do procurement and people who are involved in equality and diversity do. So we prioritised making sure that we produced the toolkit, and we've got a report on the project findings which underpins what's in the toolkit, and that was our priority. Sort of ahead in a way of doing some of the kind of work which we'll do, engaging more with kind of academics who are interested in the area. So I just want to introduce, I'll just say hello to Hannah, because I remember Hannah from
Hi Tessa, are you okay? Sorry I'm late.
Different organisations. Yes, sorry, interrupting myself there. So the Buying Social Justice project, the aim of it was to investigate how people are using public procurement to advance equality and diversity in employment, with a particular focus on construction, although not exclusively. So you can see the website here, which is introducing the research. I'll just go down to the bit, we'll come back to the research report and the toolkit in a moment, but I'll just go down to the project objectives there. So we wanted to find evidence of how people were using social procurement, and we're interested in comparing the use and the impact of it in England, Wales and Scotland, where there are different legal frameworks, but also different sort of policy agendas in relation to social procurement. We wanted to produce some guidance on increasing employment equality through social procurement in construction and beyond, and that's what we'll be presenting today, which is our toolkit, and to extend the scope of research on equality and diversity and inclusion to include procurement. So sort of talking to equality and diversity people about why procurement's important, but also talking to procurement people about how they can introduce equality and diversity considerations more specifically. So that was those were our aims. Just say who we are briefly. So we had a team, which is myself and Hazel, who will introduce herself in a moment. But the team also comprised another, sorry, my page is being a little bit slow there, but 2 colleagues, Katerina Sarter, who's at the University of Warwick, and Joyce Mahmood, who was working with us at Queen Mary here as a researcher on the team. And also we were very, very lucky to be supported by a wonderful project advisory board. So these are people who are kind of involved in some way or other in procurement and equality. And Rebecca was one of our great people on the team who was very helpful, both in sort of all different stages of the project. So in terms of kind of accessing research participants, but also in the stage we're at of disseminating our results. So we were very lucky to have this very sort of expert team of practitioners who we hope to keep in touch with. So our main findings, well, we had a number of findings which I won't present here because I want time to show you the toolkit. But just to say that there is the report of the findings is available on our homepage, and you can just click on the link and download that. But one of the particular findings was that people had an interest, even if they weren't doing a lot of the inclusion of equality and diversity within their procurement activities. People had an interest, but they often didn't know where to go to get more information about what they could do, and also kind of other good practice examples. And that was what led us to produce the toolkit. So this is what we're presenting now. I am going to show you how to download it from the website, because we do ask people, some of you may have done this already, but we do ask people to give us their name and email address when they download the toolkit so that we can follow up later. So it is important for us, much as we want people to sort of share the toolkit widely and use it, please don't download the PDF and send the PDF round to your friends and colleagues, because then we don't know who's got hold of it. So if you can just send them the link, which is this page, then they can download it themselves, and we know, and then we can harass them later about how they're using it and what they think. So this is where we ask you to, I shall just send my, oops, can't even spell my own name, send myself an email. Oops. And then we should get the link to download the toolkit. And obviously, once you've downloaded it once, feel free to kind of save the PDF onto your system. The last thing I want to say before handing over to Hazel is just to say that we were very lucky to have Frances McAndrew, who is sort of a long-standing equality and diversity expert, who's worked in many different organisations, and she's somebody that I've kind of been talking to over the years about linking procurement and equality. So she wrote the toolkit for us, kind of in conjunction with us, really. We provided her with a lot of material, and she sort of synthesised it into a more accessible format. And obviously there's a lot of to and froing and interference from us to get the final version. And then we gave it to an organisation called Research Retold, who produced it in this very nice interactive format for us. So that's something we certainly couldn't have done ourselves. So we're very grateful to them for producing it in a friendly format. So I'm going to hand over to Hazel now, who's going to give me instructions as to when she wants me to click on the interactive document. So here you are, Hazel, you have the front page. Take it away.
Yeah. Thanks, Tessa. Hello, everybody. I'm Hazel Conley, and I'm a co-investigator on the Buying Social Justice through Procurement project. And what I wanted to talk to you today about the project was really to tell you what the unique selling points are of the toolkit. And I think possibly the very first unique selling point is the fact that it's really innovative. As far as we know, the toolkit is the first of its kind to specifically address equality, diversity and inclusion in public procurement. So to use public procurement as a way of advancing equality, diversity and inclusion to the private sector. We all know that there are quite strict rules about EDI in the public sector, which often aren't picked up as much in the private sector. So public procurement offers a unique opportunity to use that buying power to extend good equality practice into the private sector. So another unique selling point is, Tessa, if you could just click to page 1 of the toolkit. And we could see there our methodology. You could see that the toolkit is evidence-based. So this isn't just kind of our views around the use of public procurement and equality. We actually draw on evidence where we spoke to experts in the field, many of whom were on our advisory board, but others who were active and interested in equality, diversity and inclusion in public procurement to get their views of the use of public procurement and EDI. And you'll find throughout the toolkit that we refer to expert interviews that we did to support some of the points that we're making. But we also did a survey of public sector public procurement organisations, and we got over 100 responses where they gave us examples of where they'd used public procurement to advance equality and diversity in their organisations. And it also gave us some basis on which to make some comparison about different organisations and the way that they were using them. So we looked at local authorities, we looked at housing associations, we looked at universities, and we also looked at some transport sectors and where they were particularly using construction. Did I miss anybody out there, Tessa? I don't think I did. So we did the survey, and then we also did some case studies of best practice. And I think, Tessa, if you could just flick to an example of where we've used a case study in the toolkit, that would be really useful. So we could just give you an example. So this is an example of Islington County Council, City Council, sorry, London Borough, in fact, not a county council at all, that we interviewed, who had done some particularly good work around the living wage, and also worked with a women's group on the use of the site of the women's prison in Islington, the famous women's prison in Islington, which is being redeveloped. So this is an example of a county council where they'd used their public procurement in a number of areas to advance equality, diversity and inclusion. Okay, I'm just about to plug my computer in because the battery is running out. This is always the way. Right, okay. So the next selling point that I wanted to talk to you about was the fact that the toolkit is very practical. It's based on a step-by-step approach. So we know one of public procurement can be very complex and difficult to navigate, and it goes through a number of different stages. So what we've done in the toolkit is look in detail at what you can do at particular areas of the public procurement process. So you see that there are some detailed advice about what you could do in the preparation stages when you're preparing to procure, how to build that in right at the very beginning, because one of the things that we found is that it's really important to think about public procurement strategically. Don't treat it as an add-on when you're adding equality and diversity inclusion into your public procurement tenders, but to think about it in advance and look at how you can use that in practice. And Tessa, I don't know whether you just want to go to the section on preparing to procure, just to look at some of the headings that we've got. So you can see there before procurement, and particularly how you can use section 106 and the benefits of using socially inclusive procurement. And the next stage, Tessa. So how you can strengthen foundations in relation to leadership and partnership, and these were some of the really important points that we drew out of in the toolkit around good procurement principles. The next section, please, Tessa. So building the business case, one of the things that we found was really important was how to build a business case, and if you want the buy-in of senior leadership teams, which is very important, then you need a business case about how this will benefit the public authority or whoever is using the toolkit, how the senior leadership team would buy into this by looking at the business case. And also one of the things we found that was really important was resourcing. Public procurement teams are really busy people. One of the things that we found is that they're also highly sought after And so there's quite a lot of movement in public procurement professionals. So how you resource introducing equality, diversity and inclusion into public procurement really has to be resourced well. And one of the things, the difficulties that we found in some of the research is where sometimes there was a lack of working between equality and diversity and inclusion teams and public procurement teams. So one of the areas of advice that we would give is to work closely. If you're a public procurement specialist, work closely with the equality and diversity and inclusion team in your organisation. And likewise, if you're an equality and diversity and inclusion specialist, get in touch with your procurement team and see how that you can help them to build equality and diversity and inclusion into their procurement processes. Can we have a look at the next stage, Tessa? So again, collaboration is really important, not only that internal collaboration that I've just talked about, but there are also people like you out there in different organisations who really want to know more about introducing equality and diversity and inclusion into their procurement process. You're not alone. And one of the things that we found that was really useful in some of the sectors was networks that had been built up to help different organisations. So, for example, amongst universities, there are regional and national networks of procurement specialists who work in higher education in universities that work together to form policies, look at best practice. And so collaboration outside of your organisation is also really important. And here we've got, I know that this is sometimes thought of as a difficult area, but the importance of equality impact assessments. This is one of the ways that you can actually check to see that you are not only meeting your obligations under the public sector equality duty, kind of killing two birds with one stone by doing this, but also check that you're actually meeting the equality and diversity and inclusion requirements of your organisation through the procurement process. So your organisation will have an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, and you as public procurement specialists can help your organisation to reach those objectives by looking at an equality and by using an equality impact assessment. Okay, next section then, please, Tessa. So more details there around the critical stages of the impact assessment process.
Yes, it looks as if we've
lost Hazel for a second. Hopefully she'll come back. Shall I just carry on through this section while Hazel comes back?
Please do.
The pressure's on now, Tessa.
Yes, I know.
A job as a
yeah, I know. I was relying on Hazel for this bit, so unfortunately, I know the toolkit quite well. So, just as another example of a case study, this is a housing association in East London, Poplar Harker, that works very proactively with organisations in the local community and also local builders to make sure that when they're doing kind of housing regeneration projects, they get some maximum benefits, both for their own tenants, but also for the wider community. So the final bit of the preparing to procure section is preparing the market. So making sure you have as much sort of information and knowledge about who's out there who might be able to submit a bid to be involved in the procurement, and some ideas about capacity building to support small and medium enterprises, because that's often part of the objectives of organisations, is to make sure that they both have access for smaller businesses, but also supplier diversity, ensuring that those businesses are representative of the wider community. Hazel, I just carried on there while something terrible happened to your connection. So
yeah,
I think I've got to the end of section 1. So do you want to take over again?
Okay, so had we worked the way through the sort of different stages?
I've done section 1, but not the others.
Okay, so if we move to the next section then, writing the specification, we could see there that it's really important to be clear about in your specification about how you draw up the specification, and to use the procurement process really to get your ideas clear and set out the requirements, and think about in detail about what kind of expertise that you need in drawing up the specification. Okay, so if we move to the next section. So that's another case study there, which is actually University West of England. I was quite pleased that my employer thinks of itself as a good case study on equality, diversity, inclusion, and we're happy to be used as a case study. So if we move on to the next section, Tessa, I think another case study there. Yeah. So here we have some examples of equality requirements in the I won't read them, you can work your way through them, but there's some really good requirements there about what you could include in your procurement practice. Now, obviously, this would be specific to each organisation. Some organisations might be thinking about, for example, one of the things that we came across quite frequently was the use of apprentices in public procurement. That's something that a lot of organisations build in a social value to their public procurement process. However, it doesn't take much more of a step to think about the equality, diversity and inclusion aspects of introducing apprentices. So think about how you would include underrepresented groups amongst those apprentices, not just the fact that you're using apprenticeships, but actually, are you drawing your apprenticeships from a wide range of backgrounds, social backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds? Are you introducing women into jobs where women are underrepresented in the construction sector or in any project that you're seeking to put out to public procurement? Think about young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. How would you include those? Not necessarily limited to the protected characteristics in the Equality Act, but also thinking more along a wider socio-economic and disadvantaged background. Okay, so if we move on to the next section, and there's a case study of TfL for you to look at. So how do you select suppliers and how do you assess supplier capacity? That's a really important aspect. And there are different tools out there to look at that. So one that is widely used is what's been called TOMS, but there are other alternatives, and there are some more specific to particular organisations. Okay, Tessa, if we can move on. And this is how you might open up opportunities for public procurement, looking particularly around different groups and how you might think about how you would work in social partnership, perhaps with trade unions, to encourage the use of EDI inclusion in public procurement. Thanks, Tessa. We can move on again. Again, more information about other ways to open up opportunities in a wider supply chain. I won't go through them all. You could read them at your own leisure. And then we have section 4, which is tendering and assessing. So when you've kind of got your tenders out there, you get your invitation to tender prepared, but then how do you select and assess particular award criteria? So there's some useful examples in there for you to look at. Thank you, Tessa. If you could just move on. And there's some useful questions to ask, but also in section 5, how you go about actually making the decision. When you've made the decision, what the contract should look like, and then how you would monitor the contract, which is really important. One of the really important things that we found is that it's quite easy to forget the criteria that you've included in your public procurement. So how you monitor what you've put into the contract and make sure that that's delivered is very important. So there's some good advice there for you to do that. Okay. I think I might move on to another USP now, which is you've seen how easy it is to navigate. So we think that the toolkit is very interactive and easy to navigate. And the way we've been working through it, I hope you could see that that's quite easy to do. There are lots of ways of moving through the toolkit, which I think you'll find particularly useful. There are some if I don't know if Tessa can go back to page II.
This one, yeah.
Then you could see that's got some instructions there around how you can navigate through the toolkit easily. And we hope that you don't have to, although we've worked through the toolkit quite sequentially, you don't have to do that. You could, if you're already at a particular phase, you could just use that phase. They kind of stand alone in some respects, those sections. So you could use whichever section is relevant to you at that particular time. Okay, so lastly, I think one of the things that's really important to point out about the toolkit are the 6 key good practice principles that we developed from the toolkit, which is on page 28. Tessa, yeah. So each of those good practice principles has a section. So we've already talked about the importance of collaboration and partnership working, which involves good supplier engagement and also strategic alignment. So I talked about you linking up with people in your organisation, particularly the EDI department, to see how your procurement processes can fit in with the wider organisational commitments to equality, diversity and inclusion, and placing that high up on the list of the leadership team in an organisation. Getting their buy-in is really important. So there's some advice about how you might do that there. Thanks. So if we move on to the next one, Tessa. So consistency is really important. Being consistent in language and how you deliver social benefits is really important. We've already talked about resourcing, how important resourcing is, and that was a particular problem that we found, as I've already said, that public procurement specialists are thin on the ground. They're highly sought after, and there's quite a lot of movement amongst them. So thinking about how you resource your commitment to EDI in public procurement is really important. And I've already talked about the senior leadership commitment. So if we can move on, Tessa. So there's more details there and more resources for you to use in the case study, and a list of the case studies for you to look at. They give you some really good examples of what organisations have been doing successfully in relation to equality, diversity and inclusion. I think, the last point that I wanted to make, which I think is a really important point about the toolkit, is that the toolkit's inclusive. It's particularly inclusive in that it's sensitive to the fact that public procurement has progressed in different ways in England, Scotland and Wales because of different legislation. So we have a key bit in the toolkit that Tessa's kindly moved to. She's anticipated what I was going to talk about next. The legal context is quite different in England, Scotland and Wales, and so we've got a good section on there, quite a comprehensive section about how the law differs. And this actually can be quite useful to procuring or to tendering organisations, so organisations that want to bid for different public procurement tenders, for them to understand the different legislative context in England, Scotland and Wales is really important, and it has gone in quite different directions, which is really interesting for us as academics. But it also means that the public procurement landscape is quite complex and can seem quite daunting. So the toolkit offers you a really easy way of looking at what the main differences are between the procurement policies in England, Scotland and Wales, and the main pieces of legislation. So I think that's it from me, and I think it's over to Tessa for questions. And I'm really sorry about the break in transmission in the middle. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Hazel. The only other additional point I wanted to make was that in the toolkit we have these shorter version of the case studies, which you've seen. But if you go to our website, so if you click the link to go to the website, you actually get much fuller versions. So each case study is actually about, well, they vary, but sort of six to 8 pages. So much more detail. If you're interested in what a particular organisation has done, you can find all that information there. So we've picked out some key points in here, but more information is available. And obviously we'd encourage you to kind of contact people directly if you are interested in finding out more about what they've done.